From ITN headquarters, the early evening news with John Souchet.
Hello. 3 young children left alone in a house, little food and no sign of any Christmas festivities. That's the background to the latest Home Alone case, this time at a house in Leeds. The children, aged between 1 and 5, are now being cared for at a foster home. Police say the children didn't even know it was Christmas.
The 3 children were discovered by police last night at this block of flats after neighbours raised the alarm. Aged just 5, 4 and 1, they'd been left alone with little food or drink. The electricity meter was about to run out. When police knocked on the door, they were answered by a 5-year-old boy who didn't know where his father was. This afternoon, they held a whip round to buy some presents for the 3 toddlers.
They will have some sort of a Christmas. They certainly had no opportunity for a Christmas before this. The house showed no signs of Christmas decorations, no presents. It was just another dark day in their lives.
The children have been taken into care by Leeds Social Services.
They were so young, I mean, the oldest being 5, the youngest being 1. On top of that, of course, there was no food in the house, there was no sign of Christmas, and they were stuffing plastic toys into an unguarded fire.
After police had searched for several hours to find the parents, the children's father arrived home, apparently confused at all the fuss, calling for social services to give him back his children.
I got back about 10 o'clock last night. And when I come back, they wasn't there, and I ring the police, and they told me that they'd put my kids in care. And I said, any chance of having my kids back? And they said, no, you have to wait till tomorrow.
The 3 children will be spending Christmas in temporary foster care. Their father is this evening being questioned by police. Deborah Turness, ITN, Leeds.
And in the last few minutes, police in Leeds have said a man has been arrested in connection with the case. He hasn't been identified. Next, on the early evening news, the traffic builds up for the last-minute getaway. Outrage at the gang rape of 2 schoolgirls. And why John Fashanu is thanking the player he injured. Thousands of motorists took to the roads this afternoon as people made a last-minute getaway for the Christmas holiday. The motoring organisations said there were build-ups on several main roads, particularly those leading out of London. But many rail and airline passengers seem to have left early.
With most of the population taking the day off work, holiday travellers had an open road this morning. The Department of Transport managed to remove about half the nation's roadworks, easing the flow. A similar story on the railways. Here in Bristol, first thing, Temple Meads station was practically deserted. In the skies, Heathrow Airport will handle over 500,000 passengers this week. But by early today, most had already departed.
It's been a steady flow through. We were quite busy this morning, but it's now working very well. People are very cheerful and there's a good atmosphere here at Heathrow.
But getting around on the ground was more difficult in Scotland. Here in Aberdeen, the snowplows were out in force. Despite the Christmas card scenery, a white Christmas is not unusual or particularly welcome here.
It looks nice. If you're in the house looking out.
Would you like it to be a white Christmas?
No.
Why not?
I don't like snow, don't like it cold.
Snow has already closed some roads in the north of England and Scotland. Further south, tailbacks were building up this afternoon on the major motorways out of London and in the West Midlands. A real incentive to stay at home in front of a warm fire on Christmas Eve.
And to Greg Wood now at RAC headquarters in North London. Greg, what news on the last-minute rush to get away?
Well, John, there has been a late rush. The RAC says that whereas traffic levels were about 40% below normal this morning, that's been more than made up for this afternoon. What we've had is a combination of an early rush hour and the traditional Christmas exodus. That means that here in London, for example, most of the major motorway intersections are severely congested. There's also congestion at other notorious bottlenecks like the M5-M6 intersection in the West Midlands. But so far, fortunately, no news of any major accidents.
And for those getting away tonight, what sort of weather can they look forward to?
Well, wintry showers are forecast for the east coast with sub-zero temperatures throughout the rest of the country. What that means is that snow that's already fallen will be turning to ice as temperatures fall. That means that roads in the north and in many parts of Scotland are already passable only with extreme care. So if you are on the roads tonight, the advice from the RAC is, if possible, don't travel, but if you do, please keep your distance and keep your speed down.
Some good advice. Thank you, Greg. The rape of 2 schoolgirls by a gang of teenagers in South London has been described as deeply threatening to us all by the local MP. The girls aged 14 and 15 were dragged down an alleyway near a burger bar and raped repeatedly by around 7 youths. Up to 20 others are said to have looked on cheering.
The 2 girls were about to go into McDonald's for a burger when a gang of teenage boys surrounded them. The youths dragged the girls past the pub next door and forced them down an alleyway into a car park. There, just yards from the busy street, both girls were raped repeatedly by as many as 7 boys, while about 20 others watched. Police officers investigating the case described it as a horrific attack and said the girls were being treated for shock.
Any attack of a sexual nature is bad, but on 2 young girls in circumstances that have been described, this is absolutely awful.
The local MP was shocked that the attack could have happened in the early evening in the middle of Catford shopping centre.
My reaction is the same as every other decent civilised person. It's shock, horror, and deep anger that such a thing should happen in what is a pretty busy high street location.
The gang was comprised of up to 30 men, most of them between the ages of 16 and 20. Police are appealing for any witnesses who might help them track down the rapists. Caroline Kerr, ITN, South London.
There's been an angry reaction after the Wimbledon soccer star John Fashanu escaped punishment for a challenge which badly injured Gary Mabbutt of Spurs. Tottenham called the Football Association's decision a waste of time. But Fashanu today thanked Mabbutt for helping to clear him.
A relieved John Fashanu joined his Wimbledon teammates for a light-hearted training session this morning, having just heard that he would not have to face a charge of misconduct. A Football Association Commission of Inquiry watched this video 24 times before reaching its verdict. The man on the receiving end of the Fashanu elbow, Gary Mabbutt, suffered 7 fractures and came within a millimetre of losing his sight. But Fashanu believes it was Mabbutt's testimony that helped clear him.
Certainly, Gary helped my case. He really did. Fellow professional footballer, and I wouldn't expect him to do any otherwise. He went in there and he spoke the truth and he said it as it was, not how other people suggested it was. And I thank Gary for that. As I said, he's a mountain of a man.
John Fashanu says he won't be changing the robust style that's earned him the nickname Fash the Bash, but he hopes Gary Mabbutt will remain a friend. Despite Wimbledon's relief, this may not be the end of the elbowing incident. Gary Mabbutt still has to decide whether to take a civil action against John Fashanu. Paul Davis, ITN, Wimbledon.
The Christmas ceasefire in central Bosnia was shattered by further heavy fighting today between Muslim and Croat forces. British soldiers in the region have managed to recover an armoured troop carrier hijacked by Muslim forces yesterday, but they found it had been stripped of most of its weapons and equipment.
British soldiers in Bosnia sang about peace today during their Christmas Eve carol service, but earlier, outside their base, the war carried on. Tracers streaked around the hills as the Muslims continued their offensive, squeezing a large Croat enclave in central Bosnia. The British once again were caught in the middle. The only thing they could do was to watch at a safe distance and try to carry on as normal. Senior officers were more concerned with recovering a machine gun and mortar captured along with an armoured personnel carrier by Muslims near Gornji Vakuf yesterday.
The Bosnian commanders in the area have given strong assurances that all equipment will be returned. They've located the mortar and the machine guns. At present, they're trying to find the location of the personal equipment belonging to the soldiers who were taken yesterday.
There's been fighting and shelling, not just here, but in many other parts of Bosnia. A ceasefire, which should be in progress, has been largely ignored. But the hope is that on Christmas night, there will be some respite from the miseries of this war. Jim Buchanan, ITN, Central Bosnia.
The gunmen holding Russian teenagers hostage in a helicopter have freed most of their captives. They exchanged them for $10 million ransom from the authorities. But at least 7 people are still being held, including 4 of the teenagers.
The schoolgirls who'd been held at gunpoint in this Russian military helicopter were freed nearly 30 hours after they're kidnapped from school. soldiers from the elite Alpha Commandos had surrounded the airport at Mineralnaya Vodi, ready to storm the aircraft if the gunmen had carried out their threat to kill a hostage every 15 minutes. According to Russian television, this girl was freed along with 2 other children because the helicopter was overloaded. But the message to negotiators from the terrorists was menacingly blunt. They had suitcases packed with explosives and would blow up the other children unless a ransom demand of $10 million was met. Russia's defense minister Baivel Grachov cut short a summit meeting to fly to Moscow to personally take charge of the military operation.
The Russian news agency TASS says the ransom money was handed over this afternoon about 2 p.m. British time. It's thought there are still 4 schoolboys being held on board. The terrorists say they'll be freed when they reach Azerbaijan. Officials believe the gunmen will then try to escape over the border into Iran. Adrian Britton, ITN, Moscow.
A senior Israeli army officer has been shot dead by Arab gunmen in the occupied Gaza Strip. 2 other soldiers were wounded. The troops were traveling in a jeep when they were ambushed at a busy road junction. It's thought the gunmen were members of the Islamic fundamentalist group Hamas. The tension between Arabs and Israelis was also evident in Bethlehem, where Christmas is being celebrated fully for the first time since 1986. Palestinian activists raised their flag in the town centre in defiance of the Israeli authorities. Israeli troops eventually decided to let the flag stay for Christmas at least.
Through the dark years of the Palestinian uprising, Christmas celebrations were banished from Bethlehem. This morning it was different. Arab Christians openly celebrating, blending their religion with their pride in being Palestinian. The Israeli army, still occupiers here, had said the Palestinian flag would not be allowed in the main square. And so, of course, this morning up it went in defiance. Another token gesture, another symbol of resistance to Israeli rule. They chanted for Arafat and spoke of why the flag had to be raised.
It must be here because this feast, this Christmas, a Palestinian Christmas, and we consider the Christ as the first Palestinian martyr. So let him celebrate with us under our flag.
Christian pilgrims from around the world are coming here in larger numbers, and the economic benefits of a peace deal would be massive. For the Christian faithful, this is the spot, now inside a church, where Jesus was born. Within a few years from now, this is likely to be under the control of Palestinians, and the Israeli army will be gone. Robert Moore, ITN, Bethlehem.
Tens of thousands of people across Europe will spend Christmas in temporary shelters after the worst floods for nearly 70 years. But the floodwaters which devastated large areas of Holland, Belgium, France and Germany appear to have reached their peak.
The immediate danger seems to have passed. In Cologne, floods reached 10.63 metres, over 34 feet, 2 inches short of the record 67 years ago, the black mark on this wall. Emergency services began pumping out cellars and hope streets in the old town will be passable by Boxing Day. People who park too close to the river no doubt feel the Christmas spirit has been well and truly dampened, but not for everyone. Santa was out and about on the emergency walkways. In Bonn, the Parliament building was threatened by the waters of the Rhine. In Holland, more people had to be evacuated from their homes as large areas of the country were swamped by rivers bursting their banks. The floods across Europe have ruined Christmas for thousands of people, driven from their homes by the rising waters. They've caused so far uncounted damage to industry, communications and property. But above all, they've reminded us how vulnerable sophisticated societies are in the face of the elements. Lawrence McGinty, ITN, in Cologne.
Finally, flooding in England has meant that Christmas will be a week late this year for the people of a village in Shropshire. The only way to get to the village of Melville near Shrewsbury is by dinghy after the swollen River Severn broke its banks. The local church is also marooned, so the vicar announced today that he's postponing Christmas services for a week, by which time he hopes people can get through. The main news is that a man has been arrested in connection with the latest Home Alone case, this time in Leeds. That's the early evening news this Christmas Eve. To all our viewers, a happy Christmas. Bye-bye.